Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the October Watershed Partners meeting. My name's Emily. I work as an environmental educator at Hennepin County, and I also serve on the steering committee of this group. So today we have two presentations queued up for you, which are about a topic that is perhaps a little bit new to this group, which is sustainable agriculture. But before I get to introducing our speakers, I just want to take some time to prime our minds to think about the topic of agriculture, how it connects to our work with water and watersheds. So I do have a few questions on Slido to get us thinking. So I'll share my screen here in a moment. This is our interactive portion of the meeting. So the link didn't turn into a link, but it's there for you to copy, and I'll share my screen now. All right, so this is again the participatory part of our meeting today. So if you get out your cell phones, you can scan that QR code, or you can go to slido.com and enter the code WSP. My internet just told me that it is unstable, so I hope that we're going to make this work. And hopefully people are getting in there just fine. But remember, there are no wrong answers with these questions. So answer whatever feels like it's coming to mind for you, and we'll build a word cloud together. I think I might turn off my camera just in case that helps with my internet stability. All right, so we're going to get going here and see the first question. Hopefully you all can still hear me and I didn't go away. I'm not hearing any feedback from you all. But the first question is, where does your food come from? Someone could give me a verbal yes or something that you are still there.
We're still here. You sound great.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Yes, we're here. We can see the question. At least I can.
Okay, fantastic. That's good to hear. So as you're getting in there, I see about 8 of you are responding. I'll start to show our results. All right, so I see grocery store came out right away. I also see farmer's market. I see Walmart, frowny face. I see store, garden. Oh, your food comes from the soil. Love it. Your food's coming from Hy-Vee. It's coming from Aldi. I see different grocery stores popping up. But still just grocery store is the biggest response that we're getting here. Oh, a co-op. Yep. I love the answer soil. Whoever put that one in, that is great. Give you just a few more seconds to fill out our word cloud here. Ooh, the sun. Ooh, dirt. Yes, great answers as well. How fun. Farms. Yep. Think about where your food's coming from the origin. Ooh, okay. That looks like most of us have responded, so I'm going to move on to our next question. All right, the next question is, what word or words come to mind when you think of industrial agriculture? This image may prompt your mind. So think about that question, enter some words. We'll get our word cloud built here. All right, and I'm going to show our results. I see monoculture. I see corn coming out. This is pretty common here in Minnesota, of course. When you're driving around rural Minnesota, you're almost guaranteed to see a cornfield. I see pesticides. Yep. I see, feeding the world, important. Yep. Inputs, monopoly, labor, mass production, row crops, soil erosion. So that's kind of getting to the potential impacts of that large-scale industrial agriculture. See acres and acres. Wow, yeah, great answers coming in here. Nitrates, carbon emissions, profits, tilling. Wow, goodness. Thank you all for your answers there. Just give a few more seconds for people to finish up their answers. All right. Ooh, end of small business I saw come through. Complex puzzles. Yeah, people are thinking. Love it. All right, gonna move us on to the next question. Our next question here is, what comes to mind when you think of sustainable agriculture? Maybe the same things that come to your mind, maybe different. So throw your answers in there and we'll get another word cloud going. Okay, great, people are responding already. Show results. I see local, healthy coming out right away. That's fantastic. Cover crops, small farms, permaculture, yeah, ecosystem, doesn't harm the land. Regeneration, small scale, yeah, growing food for people. Great, great. Ooh, crop rotation, yeah. Biodiversity, focus on soil health, indigenous knowledge, multifunctional. I'm loving the variety of answers that we're getting to this. This is fantastic. I hope you continue to think about this as we move into our presentations. I just have one last answer or one last question for you all. I think I'll give just a few more seconds for folks to finish filling out this word cloud. Let's see what else, what new things. Ooh, yeah, instability I see. Lifestyle reflection, organic, family farms. Very cool, very cool. Okay, let's get to our last question here. This one is not a word cloud, so your answers will sort of pop up in scrolling form. So let's see that next one. Think about all the potential impacts to water as a result of agriculture. So in what ways is water connected to the food we eat? So this is really now, we're priming, we're getting ready to hear from our presenters today. Think about how is our work with water potentially directly connected to the food that we eat? And I'll get our answers to show up. Nutrient runoff, water supply, irrigation, groundwater impacts, food is made of water, makes food possible, it's going, gone, polluted, runoff, pesticides, fertilizers. Yeah, it grows food, it's vital, plants need water, fantastic. Ooh, and I'm seeing some common themes pop up at the top. So water, of course, irrigation is a common answer, seems. Food, of course, runoff as well. We're definitely in the water world. We're thinking about runoff. We're thinking about pollution potentially coming from agricultural settings. I see chloride contamination. Significant water is needed to grow crops. Yep, and significantly more for meat production as well. Yep, good tie in there. Great. Well, thank you. You're welcome to continue filling out this poll, but I will sort of move us on, transition to our speakers now that you're primed and ready. And I am going to hopefully stop sharing my screen here. All right, and turn my camera back on now that we're maybe not so unstable with our internet. All right, so thank you all for participating. That was really insightful. If you would like to continue filling out that poll, I think that last one's still open for you to still submit your answers. But I hope it really got you thinking about the connections between our food and our water supply. So I will, just in the interest of time, ask you to consider one final question in your own mind. So I'm going to put this in the chat for you and then introduce our speakers. So this last question for you to consider as we move into our speakers today: how do sustainable farming practices and local farms combat climate change and benefit water quality? So just think about that, and I will get us started with our introduction of the speakers. So I think we're going to hold the questions till the end of both presentations. So during both presentations, just put your questions in the chat if you have them. I'll keep track of those. So I just want to make sure we have enough time for both presentations to go before we start answering questions. So we don't want anyone to get cut short. So first, we will be hearing from Angie Hong from the East Metro Water Education Program and also on the steering committee of the Watershed Partners, and Summer Badawi from Big River Farms. So Angie and Summer will speak about Washington Conservation District's work to establish new relationships with BIPOC-led farming groups in order to better support a transition towards sustainable local farming. And they will also share insights about what they learned during a workshop hosted by Big River Farms this past spring, where farmers shared their thoughts about long-term goals and their support needs. And then after Angie and Summer present, we'll hear from Kevin Ellis and Grace Rude about the Minneapolis Food Vision, which is a 10-year plan that outlines how to build and support a local food system that is just, resilient, and equitable. So the city of Minneapolis developed this plan recently to provide healthy and affordable food for everyone in their community, minimize food waste, and care for the environment while addressing the impacts of climate change. So with that sort of lengthy introduction and priming, I'm going to now hand it over to Angie and Summer.
Okay. Is everybody seeing the slide deck now?
It's taken a second to pop up for
Okay.
me, but now I see it. It's there.
You are seeing it. Awesome.
Mhm.
That sounds great. So I will kick off the introduction. Emily already introduced me, and I know quite a few of you already. But Summer, do you want to briefly introduce yourself as well before I start through our presentation?
Yeah, sounds good. Hello, everyone. I'm not sure, maybe I've met a few of you, but I've been in the kind of nonprofit and farming world for a long time. I was a former vegetable and then cut flower farmer with my own business. And then I transitioned to working at Big River Farms just this past spring. So I'm new in the position, and I'm a program manager, which covers a lot of different areas of the work, but the main focus is to really help operate our year-round training program and incubator farm. So managing staff, helping build partnerships, and helping to build our program, which I'll get into a bit more, and connecting growers to resources.
Awesome. So to set the scene a bit, the Washington Conservation District was established in 1942. And soil and water conservation districts were established all around the state of Minnesota in direct response to the Dust Bowl in the Great Depression that happened in the 1930s. And we know that farming has incredibly transformed the landscape in Minnesota over the past 150 years. And it's also changed a lot. So the farming that is happening today is not the same as the farming that was happening in the 1940s. And as an organization, we are aware that we're not working with all of the farmers in our county. And we're also, kind of setting our sights towards the future and thinking, how can we support small scale growers that are doing the sustainable practices we'd like to see more of? And how can we help to encourage a transition toward local sustainable food production? So, last year in 2022, we got a small $10,000 planning grant from the National Association of Conservation Districts. And it was to support relationship building with Big River Farms and other nonprofit organizations in our area. And I know that for a lot of people in Watershed Partners, your organizations have also been going through some equity planning processes and thinking about how you can better work with underserved communities in your area. We've been doing that as well. So this was kind of complementary to that ongoing conversation at our organization. I'm going to go ahead and let Summer talk a bit about Big River Farms because it is a pretty unique program, and it's been a staple organization in my mind that's been doing farming in Washington County for quite a long time now. So I'll kind of turn it over to you, Summer, and just let me know when you need me to advance the slides.
Sounds good, thanks. I will just give a brief intro of the organization. I'm sure some of you may be familiar with it, some of you may know a little, and some of you may know nothing at all. Big River Farms, has formerly known as the Minnesota Food Association, has gone through many different transitions as an organization, but still on the same land for doing grower training and having a teaching farm and incubator model that's kind of fluctuated throughout the years for about 20 years. And that's the farm site is located in Marine on St. Croix, and it's located within the Wilder Forest. And we are tenants of the Wilder Foundation, but if you've seen in the Star Tribune recently, they are trying to sell the property, and that's been ongoing for a while. And so we are just tenants who then lease to farmers as well. So it's kind of an interesting model and relationship. Big River Farms was, in 2017, was kind of taken under the umbrella of the larger organization known as the Food Group that works on hunger relief efforts and kind of accessing the food system work from different angles. So we're a piece of that by having a farmer training program and growing site to help grow fresh food for the Twin Cities community. We are a certified organic farm, so every grower coming into work on our land has to follow organic practices and do all of that fun certification paperwork, but it's a great way to practice and implement record keeping habits, because that's the least fun thing that you want to spend time doing as a farmer when you're super busy is write things down. So we have about, every year kind of varies, and we have about 14 farm teams operating on site this year. And that just means like independent businesses or independent operations. We have folks from about 8 different countries represented. It's all vegetables, you know, a little bit of flowers, but we're mostly a vegetable operation. And we are growing, we have 60 acres enclosed in deer fence, and usually it's about half or less in production, with the other half in cover crop and rotation. I'm just going to explain the models that we use for our program. It's kind of unique having this nonprofit structure, operating farmer training, and an incubator plot where people are running their own businesses. As you can imagine, it's very like interesting and complicated and ever fluctuating. So, you know, you kind of make your best laid plans and then know that you're working with people. It's very relationship-based work, and you're very adaptable to everything that's happening every day. So the kind of 2 models that we have worked on kind of reflushing out is a grower training program and then an incubator program. So grower trainers, it's land-based training. It's people that are new to growing. Either they have some experience perhaps in a community garden in their backyard. Maybe they come from a cultural or historical agricultural tradition. Maybe they grew back in their country of origin and are looking to learn how to grow in our climate or learn how to grow for market. And so most of these folks have day jobs. So we call them like night farmers, you know, because they really have to balance coming after hours and on the weekends while having a full-time job that's paying the bills. And so most of these growers enter with training plots, we call them, and usually that's about 1/8 of an acre. So small scale, but still 1/8 of an acre when you have a full-time job is still, and you have to drive up to the farm, is still quite a bit of land to maintain. And so this program really focuses on teaching people the basics of organic crop production. It's kind of their learning lab. They get one-on-one support with mentors. That's either farmers in the industry, our staff. We have about 8 staff that works on either maintenance, admin, programming, teaching, farm production. So it's kind of a unique support system on site. And then we connect folks with like outside mentors and support. We have a year-round coursework and training. Obviously in the winter, it's a little more focused on inside with that production planning, learning about markets, learning about greenhouse production, et cetera, et cetera. And then as people move through in their first few years, really, you know, it's really best for people to really get some growing experience under their belt before they try to produce for sale. Many people, once they enter, you know, there's so much risk, it's taking their time and money, and once they enter, they really want to start selling immediately, but we really want to focus on that leveled approach. Okay, I'm going to move a little faster. Incubator program. This is folks that are coming from newer businesses. They have maybe just started, or again, they have lots of experience growing maybe in their country of origin, and then they have some experience growing in Minnesota, but just need a little bit more support establishing into our market systems that we follow here. The small scale acreage is usually 3/4 an acre to like 2 or 3 acres. And for most of them, that would be more of a full-time operation for them. Some people will have come through the training program, or they can actually apply to this model independently of that, just because they need access to land and different resources. So they would get like business development support, access to networks, also mentorship, doing farm visits to learn from other growers, but also have all of the infrastructure included on site. We have irrigation, greenhouse, pack shed, everything that you really need to operate your small vegetable growing. Okay, so what?
No, I was apologizing. I was just trying to guess when you were.
Yeah, Angie's operating for me, so I should just say, take it away. Okay, so what's interesting about this type of model, obviously organizationally, there's a lot of benefits and challenges, but for growers, it's very low risk to start up. Like, they don't have to purchase land or buy a lot of infrastructure. So in that sense, it's like an easier way to learn about farming, and if that is really a fit or that works for you, and if you would want to even start that as a business, we have the land, which can be difficult to find lots of available land with amenities, and especially with like so much built-in support. And also many growers are working without even having irrigation systems, let alone walk-in coolers. So to be able to have access to really properly irrigate, wash, cool, and store your produce, free to low-cost education, and also the uniqueness of having so many folks learning and growing together on site. You really have to be interested and able to grow and work in community in that sense. Challenges are it takes your time. It takes you away from maybe making money in other ways. Time is money kind of thing. Land insecurity, as I mentioned, we don't own that site. So we are also not sure always of the state of that. And also farmers don't own that land. So they're really just operating on a type of incubator site that, as they work to build soil and stuff, they are not, they won't necessarily keep that work they've done with them. It's can be a very long commute, lots of driving. We're about 30 miles from the city, so people are coming from all over the place. And then farming is a tough business, physically demanding. It requires so much of you. It is very it is very tricky to be able to manage that type of seasonal work, the ups and downs, the fluctuations, how intense it is in the season. And really, we really have a huge challenge of our in our food system. It's not really quite prepared to really support local in the way that one would hope. And so there are a lot of challenges with selling and having consistent access and support to market and sales for locally grown food. Okay. So, we, as mentioned, we are very adaptable. The model of the training programs and the organization always kind of fluctuates depending on who's participating. So it really has to kind of adapt to the needs of the folks that it's working with. So, we solicit a lot of feedback from the growers and a kind of our grower network and community that we're working with. Angie is going to share a little bit more about like a listening session that we all did together, because that's really important to, facilitate this conversation, to really know what people are needing, what they're looking out for, what really they're hoping to do with their business and this work, or even how they may want to grow food for their community. You know, I started working in this field, training young people to learn how to be an entrepreneur, and now we're working to like actually have people to build full-fledged businesses in many cases. So it requires a lot of different lessons learned every day. I think that is, I will wrap up with that. And I'll just chime in, Angie, as needed if you have anything you want me to give input on.
That's great. So we had these grant funds. Big River Farms is one of the organizing sponsors for the Emerging Farmers Conference every year. So I attended that in 2022 and participated in some of the listening sessions, took notes at that event. We had our own interagency workshop in February of this year. And then we had a workshop in May that was hosted by Big River Farms, but invited staff and farmers from a number of different small farming organizations, and particularly ones that were BIPOC and immigrant-led farming groups. So the key takeaways that we heard from people in these various listening sessions we had, and this really emphasizes some of the issues that Summer already mentioned. Land access is the major barrier for beginning farmers. And I'm going to talk a little bit about, share a few quotes from the farmers themselves. There's really significant cultural differences between the new and established farmers in our region. One of the things I observed also is that there's a continuum between community gardens and small scale commercial farming. And beginning farmers in general are wanting more support for soil and water testing, improving soil health, learning basic farming skills, sharing equipment, and just understanding and accessing the various government programs. So land access. I think we all know land is incredibly expensive. It's not easy to come by. And in general, the markets where the population base in the state are in the Twin Cities. But the land prices are so high that people end up having to move further and further out in order to buy or lease affordable farms. So it turns into a time burden, a travel expense. It also creates a lot of social dynamics when we are talking about farmers who are Black, Indigenous, people of color, immigrants moving out to predominantly rural white areas. So a few quotes from people, and I included people's cultural background when I thought it was kind of relevant to help understand their perspective. So here is a farmer from Brooklyn Park who is Black and talking about, how do you feel safe moving to a rural community that you aren't from? This is a major barrier for me. Another farmer saying, it's hard to make friends in your 30s, especially in a rural area. And then a third farmer saying, the gas kills you driving to and from the farm. So maybe you're able to buy affordable land or lease affordable land, but then losing a lot of the money just traveling back and forth to the cities all the time to sell your produce. Highlighting a little bit more of the cultural differences. So previously, our office in 2019 had done a survey of, I think it was around 350 farmers that are in Washington County, Chisago, and like Lower Pine County as part of a Lower St. Croix planning process. And in that survey, we were hearing from a lot of who we would consider the traditional conventional farmers that the SWCD is working with, people who own 40 acres or more, they're growing row crops, they have pastures, they're raising livestock. Of the farmers in Washington County, we know that 93% of them identify as white or European American. And in general, those people are coming from a tradition of private land ownership. So that's really baked into how people talk about farming when, it's like, this is private land, government, get out of my business. And then a lot of the farmers coming from Indigenous, Hmong, African cultures are coming from a tradition of collective land stewardship. So it's just kind of a 180-degree different way of looking at land stewardship and raising or growing food. So one example, the top quote, I rent the land, they raise the crops. This is something that we've got a lot of people in Washington County that they own, 30 acres, 50 acres, whatever. They rent it out to a farmer. The farmer comes and grows row crops. That's the end. It's a purely transactional relationship. And in contrast, here is a woman who attended the Big River Farms workshop, and she says, 5 of us are sisters in friendship, and we work in community with one another. We want to farm together. African farmers want 10 acres to farm between 20 people, not 70 acres for one person. We only need half an acre each to grow food, plus some room for the kids to play. So you could see like 2 just very, very different perspectives on farming. I'm going to try to keep us moving along here. We want to grow food to sustain the land and serve our families and community. As a tribal member, it's challenging to straddle 2 worlds. The idea of land ownership and access is strange. It doesn't align with Indigenous land stewardship. You can't access federal programs when farming on tribal lands. Municipalities and counties can, but not tribes. Or I would like to move toward a communal living system with multiple families living together and farming the same land. And just to point out that that last quote was from a European American farmer. So there are people from, multiple different cultures that desire to have this kind of communal farming situation. A lot of people talked about the relationship between community gardens and small scale farming. People saying at community farms, you never know if you're staying in the same place from year to year. We're still trying to figure out the scale of farming that we're best suited to. And people talking about many churches are offering their properties to be used for community gardens, but is the soil safe? Who can we work with to test it and to find out? And just a lot of feeling like, how much do you want to commit to improving soil health in one location if you don't know how long you're going to stay there? People talked a lot about wanting a checklist for beginning farmers and rules we need to know about, making resources super accessible, or just having better alignment between, state programs, nonprofit grants, and what the city or township rules might be, so that people aren't being offered grants for things they're not actually allowed to do. And then finally, I know that I'm approaching the end of our chunk of time, so want to make sure to share some of the recommendations that we are making as a result of these listening sessions. And we kind of separated out by responsible entity. For Washington Conservation District, would like to work on institutionalizing the relationships we have with nonprofits in our area that are working with beginning farmers, providing better small scale or better support to small scale farmers. Consider working with Washington County or a nonprofit to develop or help support models for leasing and selling land to small scale farmers in our area. And the conservation district could be providing support to develop conservation-minded whole farm designs for these locations as well. And just doing a better job of sharing information about grant programs, water testing, and educational programs. For Washington County, the county itself owns a lot of land and actually has a fair amount of parkland that they are currently renting to farmers. And, this is mostly at the moment being rented out to row crop farmers. But there's the possibility that the county could consider allocating some of its land for small scale organic food production, or that it could do that with an emphasis on supporting underserved populations. And also the possibility that the county could consider establishing some agricultural easements to protect high quality farmland, so the options aren't just get developed or stay natural, which seems to be what the majority of the land is in right now. For Minnesota Extension, providing additional information to farmers about soil testing options and where to get assistance through these various programs. Collaborating with field offices, SWCDs, and nonprofit organizations to promote the classes that they're offering, and just working to develop even stronger connections between the community gardening programs, which are hosted under Master Gardeners, and the agricultural programs, which are hosted under a different extension program, so that those 2 programs are communicating with one another. And then finally with NRCS, thinking about how they can work collaboratively with all these different organizations and provide information to support and help reduce barriers. In general, I think it would be helpful if all of us were all getting together and convening regional groups to collaborate and provide better support. And that's kind of a direction we're going to be pushing toward in the near future. And just a quick note of the total budget for this project. It was a $10,000 grant project, and we probably spent another, $12,000 or so on staff time and equity consulting. So, since I know that this is a kind of project that other organizations might be interested in doing and wanting to know about how much to budget for that. Okay, I'm going to stop so that we don't go over our time and let our next set of speakers talk.
Thank you for that, Angie. I'll hand it over to make sure Kevin and Grace Rude have some time to speak as well.
Grace, do you want to share your screen? I'm not sure if I can.
Yeah, that sounds good. Hold on. So it's being a little rude here. Oh, come on, presentation. You can load. Okay, there we go. Share my screen here for you. All right, and that look good? Everyone can see that, okay? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Great. We can do some intros first. My name is Grace Rude. My pronouns are she, her. I work on the Homegrown Minneapolis team of the Minneapolis Health Department. As I said earlier, we're our city's food systems initiative, and I primarily support urban agriculture and farmers markets. And we just completed the Minneapolis Food Vision. It was passed by our city council and mayor in March. So excited to talk to you guys a little bit about what we're up to.
Yeah, and I'm Kevin Ellis. I currently work for Hennepin County as a conservation specialist with Land and Water Unit. So we serve as the Soil and Water Conservation District for Hennepin County. We do a lot of work doing things like restoring wetlands, planting trees, helping farmers implement conservation practices, also doing things like soil testing and technical assistance support for farmers, whether they be out in Western Hennepin County doing your conventional row crop agriculture, dairies, but also in urban areas as well. In addition to that, I am on the Homegrown Food Policy Council. I've been on there since early 2022. But before that, long before I moved to Minneapolis, I was on I guess my first interactions with food policy planning was I got asked to serve as a third party technical assistance person. I don't know what the correct title would be, but to settle a dispute between the city of San Antonio and backyard chicken owners, which was kind of an interesting process, but that led to working with the Food Policy Council of San Antonio. So that's how I kind of got into this work. Went to grad school for sustainable agriculture and community and regional planning, found my way up here and kind of found my way to the Food Policy Council here.
Thank you. So I know we already kind of talked about this, but just as a quick reminder, Homegrown is a city community partnership really that's focused on the full food system. We work primarily in the following food systems areas. So we support community gardens, we support farmers markets, we help fund food shelves, and we also coordinate the food council. Kevin, do you want to talk about the food council? I can also share.
Yeah, sure thing.
Okay.
The slides weren't moving on my end.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm
I
sorry.
was going to mention that we're not.
Oh,
seeing
they didn't move for you? Oh, what are you
Well, we're
looking?
seeing the I think it's the wrong screen being shared because we're seeing like
Oh.
the background PowerPoint, not the presentation.
I'm sorry about that. Hold on.
Yeah. I think you just have to unshare and reshare so that you're sharing the
Yeah.
presentation.
I'm sharing. Share the correct screen. Sorry, is that look good? That says Food Council at the top? Okay, great.
Perfect. So yeah, the Homegrown Minneapolis Food Council, again, I serve as a community member on there as a Minneapolis resident. It was launched in 2012. It's a 25-member advisory group appointed by mayor and city council. We actually have an application period open right now for the next 2-year term for council members. There are some special appointments based on Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board. I believe Minneapolis Public Schools has a spot. I think I'm forgetting a few others, but they have some specific ones that they appoint. And so that's breaks out to 17 community members and 8 city representatives. Again, we work with diverse stakeholders to build healthy, resilient local food system, connects local government, businesses, organizations, and residents. So a lot of people who sit on the council come from a variety of backgrounds, experiences, jobs, expertise in kind of all facets of the food system. So not just urban agriculture or the environment, natural resources, but also things like food waste, local food businesses, community gardens and farms, public health. All of these things are kind of reflected in the makeup of the Food Policy Council, which is great. And as you can see from this slide, this is some of the work that we kind of touch on. Increasing access to quality food, which is a big one, especially fresh and local produce, address hunger and food insecurity, connecting the sectors of the food system. So again, all these things don't exist in a vacuum and just come together once a month for a meeting. This really gives us a chance to kind of look for those connections and find ways to strengthen those bonds, which in turn hopefully strengthen all those sectors. Again, influence policy and decision-making, especially at the local level. And then ensure an environmentally sustainable and socially just food system. So again, tying in equity and sustainability into food systems as well, which I think are very key bedrock parts of it.
Thank you. So we wanted to come and share a little bit about the most recent kind of Food Council and Homegrown project, which is the Minneapolis Food Vision. And the Minneapolis Food Vision is this big kind of 2023 10-year vision and has things we're calling priority areas, which are like 6 topics, strategies, and then suggested metrics as well. And it's really focused on what the city can do and in partnership with others. So policy and investment, and then also Food Council action. It is based on, a lot of work of Homegrown. We started in 2008. So building on all of that work, as well as the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact, which is a pact that cities can sign on to that says they'll make a food systems plan. And we're also a companion to the recently passed city's climate equity plan that just passed in June, I think, June or July. Oh, my button did not work. There we go. So when we first started the work to develop a vision for the food system, the Food Council wanted to develop some guiding food justice principles. We wanted to make sure that the work we did moving forward was really grounded in shared values. The 7 food justice principles that you see here serve as this values-based framework to guide the content, priorities, and implementation of the food vision with a focus on equity. And these are just like the names of the principles. There's like a whole text with them. So they might not all seem to make sense together, but there's kind of text about how these all help us work towards food justice. The food vision, as I said, has 6 priority areas you can see on the screen here. So they're categorized under local food supply, urban agriculture, local food business, healthy food skills and healthy food access, wasted food, and food systems research and outreach. And there's 29 strategies that break out between those 6 categories to support them. These priority areas and their strategies were developed through a lot of community engagement. We had over 1,000 people who were involved in developing the food vision. The process began in spring of 2019 and was delayed by COVID, as you can imagine. So we just got it approved by City Council in March. The Food Council started with the food justice principles that I talked about earlier. Following that, they identified the priority areas and strategies. And those were developed not only through Food Council meetings, but also we had community focus groups, individual, kind of expert interviews, and then also topic-specific online events. And then later in prioritizing, we also did an online survey about how we wanted to prioritize our strategies. So lots of different methods of engagement.
Chris, I was gonna see if you could just back up a few slides to the food action
yeah.
plan. Yeah, because it falls in nicely here. So now that we have the food vision, this is kind of, where we want to go, what we want the food system to look like in Minneapolis. Go back, I think it's 1 or 2 more slides back.
Okay, I was like, which one?
1 more. There we go.
Oh yeah, I missed that one. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I think it ties in nicely here. And so, we kind of have this big overarching plan, but how do we get there? And that's a question that came up, I think, pretty regularly in a lot of our outreach and in meetings. Is this sounds nice and great. How do we get there? And so that's something we're working on now. So the food vision, kind of the strategic plan, I would say this is kind of the actionable part of that. If you break it up into 2 parts, we're kind of moving on that now. And so it's a companion document, again, making very clear connections to that food vision of this is what we want, this is how we'll get there. It has, we're working on breaking into working groups on different topics, prioritizing strategies, kind of figuring out a timeline for what's a good short-term strategy versus long-term. What can we get done now that'll help build to some of those longer term actions, and again, developing metrics and resources, which has been tricky. How do we measure the success we're having? If we are having success, if it's something that's not working, needs to be changed on the fly, how do we develop that? And so again, there's some things that it kind of makes sense, for local urban agriculture. How many pounds of produce are we producing? Something as simple as that. But we're also trying to make a priority of digging in a little bit further too, to see beyond just numbers, what is the actual impact? And again, that can be a little bit more qualitative than quantitative. So it's been tricky, but it's something we're working on right now, and it seems to be going well so far. Again, this is just the first phase of the food vision implementation. It'll kind of continue to grow as we kind of make our first step into playing a role, an active role in the action here, and see what the results are. But again, it's not just kind of, this is what we're hoping it to be, and then just walk away. It's a big part of this is getting involved. And so we did want to talk about a little bit about urban agriculture specifically, because that seems to be closest to the topic of sustainable agriculture, which I would contend that a lot of the topics that we talk about here tie in some way, shape, or form. But urban agriculture is pretty key here, and I think has a lot of environmental impacts as well. There's a lot of research right now on kind of ecosystem services of urban agriculture viewed through the prism as green infrastructure or nature-based solution. And I think there's a lot of value there, could be. But I think with most cities that I've seen, it's all about getting organized and kind of getting on the same page and really trying to provide all the tools necessary for getting people or allowing people to effectively participate in agriculture. And again, this can be a spectrum from community gardens all the way into smaller commercial farms in urban areas and everything in between. So backyard gardens, teaching gardens, nonprofits, there's a little bit of everything. And so that does make it a little bit harder, but here's some of the strategies that we have specifically for urban agriculture. So the top 3 here, 2.1 is increase, maintain, and improve land access within the city for growers and year-round growing. And this is probably pretty consistently, I think it's similar to what was mentioned in the listening sessions by Angie, just access to land. You got to have land to grow something. In most cases, you can do container gardens, but in order to have to scale up to provide enough food, you really need that that land access. So it's something we're hoping to work on in not only finding ways to open up more land, whether that be tax forfeited land, city-owned lots, but trying to find ways to get people back on the land and to grow things. And that year-round growing aspect is very key too. Given that we're in Minneapolis and there's snow on the ground for a good portion of the year, it's really hard to grow things in those conditions. Again, for me being from Texas originally, that's still kind of a novel concept. But there are some really interesting strategies, including deep winter greenhouses, which are the early, I guess maybe not early returns, but the returns on those are really cool. But there are some specific ordinances staying in the way of having year-round structures up for growing in. So tackling that, which again, kind of a large thing, but just kind of making the problem known, and this is what we want to go at specifically. And again, 2.2, increase access to materials, equipment, water, lighting, other resources for growing food and using sustainable production methods within the city. Again, just trying to have access to the things you need to grow. Land is probably the biggest component, but there is a lot else that goes into it, including water resources is another key one for irrigation. Again, it's kind of going back, but in San Antonio, we had a lot of issues with this as well. Getting lots onto municipal water services was a really big problem. And I think it's still something that pops up here. But things like equipment sharing, finding ways to kind of streamline that a little bit better, it can go a long way to setting up people for success in farming. And then 2.4, protecting and improving pollinator habitats and water resources. A lot of urban agriculture, whether it be community gardens or urban farms, I'd say a lot here in Minneapolis have water capture and reuse systems of some sort, whether it just be a simple rain barrel or maybe a cistern. Maybe not everyone, but a lot of people do. And a lot of these farms are very cognizant of pollinator habitat in and around their farm as well. So whether we are doing something to help boost that or try and help share what's worked for people, I think would go a long way as well. And so this is kind of looking at the specific actions. So kind of taking again what we're seeing and what we want to prioritize our strategies around. So here's some of what's been coming up in some of our more recent meetings where we are digging into kind of what these actions are. And the first one is create an equity-focused resources hub that connects people to technical assistance for accessing land and other resources, such as liability insurance for growing food in Minneapolis. So something that's come up a lot in not only with the Food Policy Council, but I'd say in my own work too, is there are so many resources out there, but there's so many acronyms, there's so many moving parts, no one knows how to maybe access some of these. And I think especially for emerging farmers who may be new to farming and beginning farming, or might be immigrant farmers who are unfamiliar with the area and kind of your regulatory and governmental agencies, that can be really tough to know where to start, especially when some of these things are made to help with farm infrastructure. So trying to find a way to connect farmers with hyper localized resources. Here's who you need to talk to. Here's how you get a farm number, access FSA resources or NRCS resources. Again, accessing land, whatever that will ultimately look like, would be a part of this. And then trying to really dig into kind of the finer points that aren't talked about as much. So again, liability insurance is pulled up here. But everyone, we talk about access to land, and I've been talking about it just now, access to land and then access to that infrastructure that'll help you get off the ground running. But some of those, the finer points in digging into kind of farm finances can be very tough, especially when you kind of have to be a little bit more generalized about it. So trying to really dig in and provide that assistance. Number 3 here is inventory and existing potential agricultural space in Minneapolis. Again, this is something that we know there's a great amount of urban agriculture happening, but there's no kind of collective resource or known entity. It's scattered in a lot of ways, as most urban agriculture systems are. And I think the biggest part to getting started on a lot of this work is just kind of better understanding who's out there, what's being grown, where it's being grown, what the land ownership or access looks like in those cases. It's a big question mark, and I think understanding that a little bit better can really set us up for success in finding what works best, maybe kind of organizing a little bit more, and moving forward. And so that's something that we're hoping to find a partner to work with, maybe do a little bit here and there, and trying to really create a map to publicize the results, maybe help foster some connections there. But yeah, I think kind of getting a good baseline of where we're at and what's working can really go a long ways. And then finally, provide financial incentives such as grants for the construction and use of energy efficient season extension, controlled environment growing structures for fruit and veggies production. Yeah, again, kind of doing what we're used to in governmental organizations, which provide the funds. I'm sorry, someone talking? Oh, that's my other question. Yeah, again, providing incentives for year-round growing structures such as deep water greenhouses or high tunnels, something like that. Trying to leverage some of those financial incentives to growing.
I think that's all we had. I had a question slide, but if folks want to learn more about homegrown, you can email us. It's homegrown@minneapolismn.gov. We also have our website. The food vision is live on there, so if you want to look through that. And then we're finishing up the food action plan, as Kevin said, but that will be posted on the website once we're done, hopefully in November. It always takes longer than you think to finish stuff, but I think we're pretty excited about our next steps. So thank you.
A couple other things. Our
Any other
meetings
stuff?
on the second Wednesday of every month from 5 to
Yes.
7:30. The public's more than welcome and encouraged to attend and engage with us as we work on this. And then also, I meant to also mention, I can drop in the chat, a lot of these plans have clear connections to the climate equity plan that the city put out.
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a note to include that, and I can't believe
I did too.
So, but I'll drop that in the chat. But again, trying to really connect it into kind of all aspects of work related to climate and the environment and equity in the city. That's really what we're trying to do with this planning effort.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks,
Great.
Kevin. You're doing a better job of repping the Food Council than me. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thank you both so much. And thank you, Angie and Summer, as well for that presentation. I've only seen one question so far in the chat, but if anybody else has questions, please feel free to type those in. Or after I see a second one just pop through. So I think this first one, this is from Sadie. I believe this was posted right after Angie and Summer's presentation, so I'll just read it out for you. The question at the end is, how do we gain buy-in and show there is enough interest to make it a reality? So Sadie just explains, it's so validating to hear your presentation. When I voice my interest in programming like this, the conversation usually dies. Most folks, county land use staff included, don't see the barriers and challenges as issues, mostly because they just can't seem to fathom a reality where something like this is possible. So Angie and Summer, how can we gain buy-in and show there's enough interest to make it a reality? Kind of, if you build it, we will come pitch.
I would love to know the answer to that question. I feel like we're so early on that I'm not sure myself. I have sent out emails to various departments in Washington County that I feel like have some connection with this topic, and people were interested. So we're going to sit down and kind of have a initial discussion and planning meeting. And for me, it was just getting through the busy time of outreach and field season and everything like that before we could do that. So I'm thinking that might happen November. But yeah, it is, I think being able to share the words of the farmers, for me, makes it a lot easier to communicate these ideas with other people, because I think a lot of people, especially those who've worked with farmers for years, have this idea in their mind of who farmers are and what farmers think and how we do outreach with farmers. And it's very based on a certain kind of farmer who, for them, everything comes down to the bottom line and it's all about economics and it's basically a business that just happens on the land. So to approach farming and working with farmers from a different mindset that isn't so, rooted in private land ownership and business, I think is going to take a while for some people to wrap their minds around.
Yeah, thank you. Does anybody else have anything to add related to that? Summer or Kevin or Grace, maybe?
This is Summer. I would say, just kind of to tack on to what Angie was saying, is do some site visits. People need to gather, they need to meet people. Connecting with the folks that they could be or working with is just so impactful. People have no idea of the different scales and the stories of people and like what food actually even looks like in the field. We do a lot of tours with some government organizations too, people that are really connected to big ag. And when they come and see small scale growing, they're like, I never even knew what this crop looked like. I can't believe people are doing this. So really just site visits, any way to organize and put people together, I think is really meaningful.
Thank you. I also see a question here from Nick. I know, maybe Nick, would you like to explain your question or read it out or ask about permaculture? Seems like what you're asking about.
Sure. Well, I think I can summarize it as this phrase that I've heard called oil to soil, and permaculture folks that will use machinery to manipulate more of the landscape and create swales, and when we're into that realm of holding water, our programs are set up to do that, and we've got grants, and we want to hold water where it falls, infiltration and that kind of thing. So I'm curious if that's like on the radar. Is it just too distant, or is it not of interest to emerging farming networks and the community model?
I can talk a little bit about at least the community garden and like small scale urban ag aspect. I think there's definitely interest, but as you said, it's a lot of work for folks, and most folks are going to want land security before they're going to want to invest that much like effort right into kind of shaping the land. But I do know, there's a lot of folks like to do rain gardens and stuff on the sides of their, maybe vegetable plots. And there's some unique things happening. I know Appetite for Change, one of their sites where they built the deep winter greenhouse, they're doing some interesting water. They got a grant from, I think, the Mississippi Watershed organization to do like rain capture off of their greenhouse and like build a rain garden. So I haven't heard a lot about any large scale stuff like that, but definitely of interest. And I think will be an important thing. As Kevin said, water access is really challenging for folks in the city. They have to get irrigation from somewhere because the rain isn't enough, especially in these past few years. And it's really expensive to connect directly. So they have to use fire hydrants. And anyway, I won't get into that part.
Yeah.
But yeah, a great idea, but early stages probably.
I will say from a lot of the conversations I've had directly with farmers, it is something that's very much of interest. Again, I think to Grace's point, it's a little bit further down on the priorities until you get established. But I'm seeing with some of the more established farms and gardens that they start to kind of experiment with that or play with it a bit. And I think the research and kind of technical assistance is finally catching up too. It had been kind of, so a lot of, forums kind of talking about it, or a lot of scattershot information, but I think it's really starting to kind of converge around specific methods, which is great to see. I guess a specific example would be Frogtown Farm in St. Paul. They're doing some really cool stuff with irrigation and capturing water and really trying to utilize it in the best way that makes the most sense for their landscape too.
I'm just going to add something. Like we work with some different emerging farmers groups, and they do care. There's a lot of conversation, and they care deeply about soil health and conservation practices. So how that's kind of looking is with a lot of other approaches like no-till farming, cover cropping, like different ways, initiatives to help prevent soil erosion and inputs into the soil, and some covering to help conserve water. Water is obviously a big issue and this year we saw, 95-degree days with smoke and no rain, and it was just like farming and like the apocalypse, so it's definitely, as people experience that, it becomes more on their radar about how to take action and implement that in their practices in the future. In terms of permaculture specific practices, you have to balance also with your focus of like production and what you need and how you can physically access the site, and what kind of, if you aren't doing no-till, if you need to use equipment. So there's always a balance of having to like also make sales work efficiently. And also we have a lot of actually older farmers too, and how does using equipment and how does it setting up their space work actually to be able to farm, to use your body and have a practice that's actually very physically demanding as well. So
Great, thank you. I see Britta shared a resource as well, the MinAg network. So there's a link in the chat for you all there. And then I see Sadie has another question. How can our more intensive community stewardship training programs like Minnesota Water Stewards tap into this realm? Who might be sponsors in the more rural or ag dense areas in greater Minnesota? Bueller, anybody?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking for Chris Meyer on here because I feel like this is a consistent challenge with water stewards in general, even if they're not working with farmers, is just in the rural areas. A lot of times the local government doesn't necessarily have the financial resources to sponsor stewards the way the metro area watershed districts do. I swear Chris was on here at the beginning of the meeting. Maybe she's gone now.
I saw land stewardship project thrown out in the comments. I think that's a great suggestion. Another one might be Sustainable Farming Association too. They do a lot of this work. I think that has kind of some overlaps. Yeah, to Angie's point, I think the resources needed may be a little bit harder to come by outside the metro area too.
And Renewing the Countryside just got a grant with the USDA to work on urban ag stuff, and they already, of course, do rural stuff because they're renewing the countryside, so they're another good.
Adam, would you be willing to talk a little bit more about the idea of land stewardship project being interested in this?
Yeah, sorry. I just know that they have like a farm beginnings program and take sort of a similar approach and really do center a lot of the work around justice and equity initiatives around farming in general. So I think they already have some things in place for this, but I'm not sure necessarily how water stewards would necessarily fit in. But yeah, I see them as a sort of a natural ally and thinking about that. They have a pretty robust staff, if I am assuming correctly. So that could be a good one. If you're on the permaculture side of things too, I believe there was like a Permaculture Research Institute cold climate group that was based out of here, maybe like Prior Lake or something. I'm not exactly sure if that's still around or not, but that could be another sort of organizing group that could help around similar types of ideas, but yeah, a little bit different. So those are my thoughts.
Great, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? You're welcome to either raise your hand or just jump in if you have a question.
I have one comment really quick, is also just on the ag side and the training side, you know, as we're working on education initiatives with growers, and we're working on a soil, train the trainer, like soil health series, but also to have resources maybe coming from you all about how to teach about water conservation and resources, like, you know, just very practical, some 101s to give people in the ag perspective to
Hey, Laura.
work on how to teach that. So yeah, okay.
Great. Well, I don't want to cut us short if someone has a burning question, but I think we're coming up on time. So if I believe we'll send maybe a follow-up with the speakers' emails, at least so that if you have questions afterward, you can connect. But I think that's closing us out of this meeting. Thank you all, and thank you to all of our presenters as well.
Thanks for facilitating, Emily.
Of course, I had a burning problem here at my other job, so it was fun to multitask.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, thank you.